After watching the first episode of Shadow's House Season 2, I made this tweet saying I thought it kinda looked like shit and no one disagreed with me, but I'm gonna act like someone did as an excuse to explain what I meant. Now, this video isn't gonna be some great takedown of Season 2 following up the kind of overdramatic video I made about Season 1. I at least gotta let the season finish first. There is certainly more to say about how the story is being handled. Plot points that were skipped over have been reincorporated after they should have happened, robbing them of a lot of their dramatic value and making the anime a lot less tight when compared to the manga. But the way they have been stitched back into a slightly altered storyline isn't as disastrous as I thought it would be a year ago. That's really all I have to say about the story so far, and I just want to clarify that I do not hate this season or anything. These first few episodes have just got me thinking more about the process of adapting something from manga to anime, and what needs to be done in order for the feeling conveyed in the former to properly be translated into the latter from a purely technical standpoint. From most chapters of the Shadow's House manga, I come away with a feeling of wonder, dread, mystery, or most importantly, a feeling of tension building between panels and across pages before finally being released at the perfect moment. With the anime though, it's very rare that I get those same feelings. I at first thought this was probably due to having already read these scenes in the manga, but as I continuously felt like I was going more and more insane watching these episodes, I finally just looked back at the exact same scenes in the manga, and I came away with the conclusion that even ignoring how the story has been rearranged in a way that makes these scenes already have less weight than they should, these scenes were just presented better in the manga. And I think by comparing them, we can learn more about what one has to think about when adapting a manga into anime, and what happens when someone doesn't know what they should be doing. First, we need to understand some fundamental differences between manga and anime. Manga are made up of panels that can be different shapes and sizes and are arranged together onto a page. The visual flow of information comes from the sequence of images inside each panel, but also from how the sizes and positions of the panels relate to each other. For example, here's a page from Berserk. This first small panel shows people confused about their current situation. The next panel shows this lady's surprise at seeing something in the distance, and is bigger than the last to emphasize her surprise and her realization at what we see in the next two panels, which are even bigger and show what she is seeing: a man in the distance looking up at her. Turn the page and you see Griffith in a panel taking up the entire page. If you were making an anime of this scene, it already wouldn't be possible to not change anything from the manga simply because anime is in a different shape from comics. All of these panels are long and vertical, as well as different shapes and sizes from each other. Anime, meanwhile, always has the same shape and size of the frame. As you can see from my editing of this Berserk scene, these panels being long and vertical makes them not easily fit into a video format. If you wanted to adapt this scene panel by panel, you would have to either draw additional stuff around what is in each panel or zoom in to show part of the panel and pan over the rest of it. Shadow's House is no exception to this. Lots of vertical panels, lots of square panels. Sometimes characters are just outside of the panels and overlap onto different ones. And while the page layouts aren't as consistently well constructed as Berserk, it is still clear how the way panels are laid out in Shadow's House is often used to convey what the characters are feeling, and work to emphasize what the viewer is meant to feel when reading it. But of course, not all page layouts and shot compositions are chosen because they convey the deeper machinations of the characters' minds or are part of the omnipotent author's grand plan. Most of the time, it's just supposed to be what generally looks the best. These panels of Rosemary and Mary Rose dancing together are cute and jump quickly between the different hobby rooms. Meanwhile, the anime takes full advantage of its continuous motion to have a full cut of the two dancing very fluidly. Both scenes look good. But then we have stuff like this panel, and its equivalent in the anime. This is just supposed to be a quick overhead shot of the room and is one of the smaller panels on its page. But the anime kind of lingers on it for way too long and even cuts back to it when the manga had been specifically focused on John and Louisa. So now we're kind of pointlessly far away from what's happening, and almost everyone is standing perfectly still, literally not doing anything. It was fine in the manga, but in the anime, I think it looks bad. At points, it feels like they're just trying to copy the manga and doing it worse. And then there are scenes they change from the manga that just look awkward and terrible now. And the animation is still severely lacking. Like, look at how flat and cheap this is. Here's an example of how you're actually supposed to make this effect look good. Notice how when you pause, there are actually multiple arms drawn instead of them fading in and out here. Oh my god, they're still making things fade in like this, and what the fuck is this? Okay, here's the same scene in the manga. This isn't even comparable. They just drew zigzags across the screen. The Shadows House anime is not always like this. Most of the time, the shots aren't awkward, the framing of characters isn't off, the directing is perfectly fine, even the visual effects aren't always terrible. Look, they drew the soot eyes in a way that wasn't insultingly cheap, but these bad moments stand out, especially when you compare them to the manga's visuals, which are sometimes just passable, but on average great and, at best, enchantingly beautiful. What really gets me though is when important moments just fail at having the same feeling as in the manga. Time to spend way too much time talking about literally one scene. Okay, so Emiliko is talking to her buddies. Sean, who in the manga hasn't gotten his brainwashing broken yet, warns her that she isn't supposed to say these things, but then she keeps pushing the same topic and then scary face. And oh no, they're pressuring her now and no, she's crying. Here's what this same scene is like in the anime.
ラムが落ちたこと、悲しくないですか？余計なことは考えない。でも、生き人形同士も仲間じゃないですか。シャドウハウスのルールって変。余計なことは考えない。
If you're really smart and cool, you can probably already tell what makes these scenes feel different, but I'm gonna need to do some explaining for the rest of you, and I'm kind of tired of being negative. I need to talk about something I like, so let's look at a good anime. Here's something super basic from a silent voice. Shoya observes his victim, then we get two smaller panels of him preparing for the next big panel where he screams in Shoko's ear. It should be obvious that this big panel suddenly coming after small panels on the previous page conveys the surprise of him yelling. Now let's look at the anime. It isn't adapting the scene exactly as it was in the manga, but it takes advantage of what you can do in an anime. Other than having the actual sound of a person yelling, we also have this quick pan out over a classroom of other students reacting. The scene is not a panel-by-panel recreation of what happened in the manga, but the fast camera motion works together with the voice acting and other students reacting to convey the same feeling of surprise. As an adaptation, A Silent Voice is flawed from a story perspective, but in all other aspects, this movie is a masterpiece, making full use of animation, music, shot composition, visual effects, voice acting, and all the other advantages anime has as a medium. But A Silent Voice is a movie with a higher budget and better ability to get some great animation, and directed by someone considered to be one of the best creators of recent times. To get a more accurate account of what Shadows House could be doing, we need to look at a TV anime adaptation with mostly low-quality animation and a director most people have probably never heard of. Let's see how the 1997 Berserk adaptation handles Griffith's duel with Guts. First of all, this scene in the manga has lots of little square panels and long vertical panels, some that even run down the side of an entire page, and a lot of the same images appear in the anime. Though, despite the original panels not being the same shape as the anime, the shot compositions never really feel awkward. This panel of a shoe is zoomed out a little to show it moving through the frame. This panel of Griffith's sword is at a different angle and shows more of the sword as it moves in front of the vast sky above. These two long panels of snow falling from a tree, framed like this to convey the height from which the snow is falling, becomes an animation of the snow slipping off the branch. This example in particular shows how the ways of conveying something in one medium are different from those of another, but it is still possible to create the same feeling by using the different medium's advantages. In this case, using the continuous motion of animation to show the process of the snow sliding off the tree and then following it down as it falls. This is shown throughout the entire scene. While the Berserk anime does mostly follow panel for panel what the manga did, it still changes those panels when necessary in order to make a better anime. Now let's compare how the original and its adaptation build tension. The page immediately before the fight starts with two large panels of Guts and Griffith as Griffith gets to the end of his narration. The panels then actually get smaller to show the others watching, and then even smaller to show Guts taking a breath, an adjustment of footing, and Griffith's sword. The panels are small to show how little time is actually passing, but each is separate from the others, a distinct moment in time to show how it feels like an eternity between each one. Then, the snow falls, and you turn the page to see a sudden explosion of movement as Griffith launches his attack. But then when you turn the page again, in an even larger two-page spread, you see that Guts has won. The tension build largely comes from the panels being smaller, and the release comes from the sudden huge panels immediately after. Changing the size of frames is not something you can typically do in an anime, but nevertheless, Berserk's adaptation still gets the same feelings across. These few seconds are made to feel long, just like the same panels in the manga through the sound design. Only the wind and crunching of snow can be heard, as well as some quick additional shots of Guts and Griffith ready to fight as the snow falls. The anime then recreates the surprise of a sudden huge panel through its sound design and these intensely stylized frames of Griffith's attack. In an anime with more consistently high production values, you would probably expect an important moment like this to be emphasized with some explosion of great animation. This scene does not have that, but it makes up for it in how it is directed. Now let's look back at that scene from Shadow's house. In the manga, the intensity of this scene comes from suddenly seeing Emiliko's friends look at her with such disgust in a panel that takes up the largest space on the page. It's also important that this panel is from Emiliko's perspective. It's showing what she is seeing in that moment. The anime completely fails at conveying the same idea with this extremely normal shot of Lou looking over at Emiliko. If this was directed by someone with more experience, Lou probably would have instantly taken up most of the frame. It would have been from a more interesting angle. Maybe there would have been some interesting sound effects. I don't know, just anything to make this moment have any impact. In the next panel, Emiliko looks terrified, and then she starts crying, and the reader feels that because this panel conveyed how she must have felt extremely well. The only thing working to get that same feeling across in the anime is the story itself, and understanding that Emiliko must be sad because seeing her friend brainwashed makes her sad. I think this is a common problem in not just Shadow's House, not just anime, but in all of storytelling. A story's premise might be the most interesting thing ever. One character's arc might sound so inspiring, or the world building seems so extensive, but when you start reading or watching or playing it, something about it just makes it feel boring. Something about the way it's handled makes it less impactful than it should be. You want to go on Twitter and call it mid, but you know if someone ratios you, you won't be able to explain exactly why you don't like it, cause on paper, the plot doesn't have any flaws. But what makes a story enjoyable is not just the plot. Everything about its presentation is important. Now, I'm no expert on anime production, but based on my extensive research watching Shirobako, these presentation issues in Shadow's House can largely be blamed on storyboarding and directing. The director of Shadow's House doesn't have a lot of experience, only having episode direction at most on a few other series, and Shadow's House Season 1 is actually his first role as a series director. I think his lack of experience is really telling in how a lot of scenes are adapted in this show, but it's not like this man is hopeless or something. Like I said already, most of the show doesn't look terrible. Additionally, there are moments sprinkled throughout that I think are genuinely beautiful. This 2-page spread from when Emiliko first walks into the hall is adapted exactly how I would have wanted it to, conveying the exact sense of wonder that its manga equivalent did while also taking advantage of anime as a medium. This shot of Kate and Emiliko looking out over the landscape is still probably my favorite thing from the anime, even though it's from the badly written final arc of Season 1. It isn't just a translation of the manga's emotion or wonder, but an original moment, crafted to be as beautiful as it could among all the bad writing surrounding it. There really are some great moments here and there that get proper emphasis in this adaptation, but this other stuff needs improvement. If you want to see a more consistently good anime from a director who has also never directed a full show before, you should watch Licorice Recoil, which is airing this season. This isn't really related to anything else in the video, I just like that show and you should watch it too. But anyways, thanks for watching all the way through this video. Tell me in the comments if you agree or disagree or if you have anything else to add, and go read the Shadow's House manga.